The way that we first began using the Ouija board was we had been at a party and someone had bought it in just for amusement. And we had a few things happen that night and we thought that it was fun. You know, it was a game. We were kind of impressed with that. We thought that was kind of neat. So we went out and we bought one. Right from the beginning, I felt a power. I felt very powerful using it. And then people would say, well, what about this? Ask it this, ask it that. And like a narcissist, it just made me the center of attention. And I think that was the lure, really, is what it was. Then after a while, I got, gee, I don't kind of like this very much, because the little disc in the middle would move on its own. And then I was no longer in control of it. The power was taken out of my hands. We were just dabbling in things we really shouldn't have been dabbling in. And we began this game, but instead of us playing it, we were the ones getting played.
Shamans, witch doctors, mediums, they all claim they can open the door to the supernatural. They say they have special training that gives them control over the powers of the paranormal world. But what happens when the untrained dabble with this other world? Do they unleash forces they can't control? And if so, what does that do to their lives? Hi, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today in Ghostly Encounters, we meet Sharon and Greg. They both have stories about accidentally unleashing supernatural forces. As a young woman, Sharon Hayward experiments with a Ouija board. It feels like harmless fun at first, but before long, that harmless fun turns to fear.
My husband and I were just building our first home here in St. John. So although we had the beds upstairs, down in the basement, that's where we had our stove and stuff. And I remember going down and putting bacon on for wheelie dealies. And we didn't have good lighting in there. Actually, it was really dark down there. Started upstairs. Something grabbed my ankle. It wasn't like something brushed my ankle, something grabbed my ankle. It was a hand, definitely. And I stood frozen for a second, then I freaked, and I think I dropped the bacon and everything and headed upstairs. And from that time on, there were just a lot of strange things that would happen. And I believe it's all directly related to what we were doing with the Ouija board. There is a figure that, shall I say, haunts the place still. I've seen it maybe a couple of times. The first time I saw this manifestation of this man in black, I came out the door of my little girl's room. And he was there at the bottom of the stairs. He's a full-bodied apparition. The first time I saw this manifestation of this man in black, I came out the door of my little girl's room. I remember thinking, somebody's come in the front door, because there's our front door, and then bang, there's our steps. And when I turned to look, it was gone. That was a complete shock. It didn't feel threatening. I didn't feel I was in trouble or I was threatened in any way. It's just like he's there and he's watching. What, I don't know. I put my son to bed, and I believe my daughter was having her afternoon nap. So I took that opportunity to lay down and go to sleep. And the first thing I remember hearing was my name, but it was Sharon. And I thought, that's kind of a weird way for somebody to to be calling me. I wouldn't have friends that would call me that way. My friends didn't just walk in the house. And I had a beaded curtain at the foot of the bed that led out to the living room, and the beaded curtain started to sway in rhythm to the voice. Sharon. So I jumped up out of bed because I just knew in my heart that, you know, it was something bad. So I ran up the stairs, and when I entered the room was very cold. I could see the drawers were moving in and out, and the whole crib was just trembling. There was a feeling of an anxiety, a panic. It feels like you can't breathe. It's just like you're held in space almost. I felt the whole place was being overtaken. So I grabbed my son up, who was still screaming, ran down the stairs, and called my husband. And all I had to say is, we're in trouble. It was exhausting. I remember feeling so physically ill to my stomach. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it wasn't just something that was in my head. I knew that there's something evil going on. I used to feel guilty. I never should have got involved in all this stuff. Now look. But I became not scared. I was angry. I was fed up. I had 2 kids. I didn't want that kind of life. I wanted to be a Christian. So I just started fighting back. And in order to do that, the pastor said, you have to leave all this other stuff behind. And so the pastor came over and blessed each room. They were there for a long time because they helped us go through the house and gather things, like anything like posters or spell books or Ouija boards or anything. They helped us collect. Took them outside and lit a fire. I won't go near it, and I won't go in a house that has a Ouija board in it. I believe that strongly, that it is a portal to something that's not good. But there is no such thing as dabbling in the black arts. You're either in or you're out. And when you try to leave, you know, it's a struggle. But I feel that I've won that struggle. And I'm much happier for it.
Sharon was a young woman when she first dabbled with the paranormal. But Greg Cairns claims that he was only a child when he first played with the Ouija board. And that made the demonic forces he let loose all the more terrifying.
I grew up here in Halifax in a family of 5, in a very Catholic family. My sister was a little impressionistic, had got a hold of a Ouija board. And I remember the first time I was sitting there with her, and you know, typically when you did what you kid, you thought you got answers to it, and I'd be darned if I remember what questions we asked. I'd love to know today, given what's happened. But I remember we got answers and laughing at it, thinking how this was strange and funny and scary. And then didn't think anything of it until a few months later, because from that point on in my life, I've had a number of different experiences. Most of them not good. Shaped like the house that you'd see, like a sea captain's house with windows at each end. So as a 10-year-old, when you're going to sleep at night, and you're at that age where maybe you still are a little afraid of the dark, what I used to notice was how the moonlight and the trees would throw shadows on the wall, and how the darkness and light would lay on different objects in the room. When I noticed that the candle that was normally on the bedside table was now on the floor in the middle of the doorway. And it didn't make sense to me. And so I looked around and to see if I was dreaming, if this makes sense. And all the shadows were exactly the same, and I was thinking my way through this, so no, I'm awake. I'm just noticing that the candle's there. And before I could get up to move the candle, the flame exploded into a fireball. And from the back of the fireball slowly emerged a dark figure. And I instinctively knew it was evil. The fireball starts to move towards me. It slowly moved to the edge of the bed, right over top of me. This whole time I'm trying to scream, and my screams wouldn't come out. I finally was able to get my arms free, and I made the shape of a cross with my arms in front of my face. And that worked. In the next second, it's gone. And everything is exactly as it was a minute ago. Nothing has changed. The candle is back on the bedside table. I felt attacked that night. I felt that negative energy, evil. I didn't see the features of the face, but you could clearly make out the shape of silhouette, jet black, big. Again, you're a 10-year-old, so a lot of things seemed big, but I would fathom 6, 7 feet tall. And this is something that is slowly moving towards you, and you can't move, and you can't scream. And then to the point where it's right over top of you. And I can't explain that. I can't compute that. I can't put that into a category and say, okay, well, that was just a bad dream. You put these things together. And then if you layer in, hey, wait a minute now. We were just playing with the Ouija board 2 months ago, 3 months ago. That's when it really gets you. And you go, well, are these connected? Did we do something? Is there something to the myth of the Ouija board and allowing something negative, demonic, what, to come in? I had one event happen there where 2 of us were in the house. Remember when you're young and you're a teen, back in the 70s, Saturday Night Live had just started to play and you'd be out. You'd come in, this show was on at 12:30 here. And we were watching that show in the living room. The living room was kind of spooky. They had a lot of old British antiques and the sort of the, loudly ticking grandfather clock. And it had 2 entrances to the kitchen, both of which were no more than 10 feet, so it's literally seconds away. And we were watching the show, and all of a sudden there's a huge crash. And we thought someone had tried to break in the back door, so we both grabbed fire pokers in the fireplace and ran different directions to come and sort of meet this person in the kitchen. And there was nobody in the kitchen, but every drawer in the kitchen, every cupboard door was wide open. And every pot and pan and knife and fork and spoon, everything was on the floor. And this is within 3 seconds, 5 seconds, as long as it took us to get in. It's impossible for that to happen. And him and I are still thinking, for some reason, someone's broken in, so we're going down to the basement, and we figure the guy's hiding down there. We never did find him. And it wasn't until we came back upstairs 5 minutes later that that creeping thought dawned in your head of, what just happened here? How do you explain that? It's awkward even speaking about it because you think, well, no one would believe that. And again, you're horrified. I didn't sleep. We didn't sleep the rest of the night because this happened. I have experienced some other events 4 or 5 years later at a friend's place who lived in one of the older houses here in Halifax, and this guy and myself came home 3 in the afternoon. There's nobody home, and he's downstairs, and I went upstairs to use the bathroom, and as a joke, this guy, a good friend of mine, if you were in the John, he'd run by the bathroom and swing the door open just in case if the sister's room was open, a sister was there, she'd see you on the John. Funny joke, right? So I'm in the bathroom, and the door swung open. And I'm waiting in, the milliseconds, I'm waiting to hear his footsteps run down the hallway or to hear, laughing voice or what have you, and I don't hear anything. And outside the bathroom, I can clearly see an older woman. This wasn't a threatening thing, it was just so odd and so scary to have happen. In the afternoon, I went upstairs to use the bathroom, and the door swung open. Just to be cheeky, I had a friend, he used to run out of his bedroom and sort of whip the bathroom door open and run down the hallway laughing. And I'm waiting in, the milliseconds, I'm waiting to hear his footsteps run down the hallway or to hear, laughing voice or what have you, and I don't hear anything. As I sort of turned to look to see if this chap was there, outside the bathroom, I can clearly see an older woman with sort of white hair, a flowing white robe, like a shift, if you will, right? And we catch eyes. She kind of tilts her head and looks at me with no expression and stays there for about a second, and then turns her head and then continues on. So I had a really good, hard 5-second look at this, right? And it took those 5 seconds for me to realize what I'm seeing. And as I realized it, I ran downstairs and I was so horrified. And I don't know why I was horrified. There was nothing negative to it, but it's just the thought of seeing something that you immediately process as a paranormal or a ghost. So I ran downstairs, and this guy realizes with the look on my face that what I've been through, and he asked me, and I tell him, and he swears to this day that he didn't run by and open up the door. And I can swear that I saw what I saw. This wasn't a threatening thing, it was just so odd and so scary to have happen. In retrospect now, I believe that foolishly when we were children and we played with the Ouija board, that's a perfect storm for something negative, evil, or demonic to be allowed to sort of creep in. And I think we allowed it to creep in by opening it up with the Ouija board. And there's enough stories similar to mine. And a reasonable, logical mind has to draw some sort of conclusion from that. And you add on that I have experienced these things. They have happened to me.
There was a time during the 19th century when spiritualism and seances were all the rage. Our experts say that's when Ouija boards were introduced as a popular new toy, a toy that promised to help the untrained and the naive dabble in the supernatural. Greg and Sharon both think that playing with a Ouija board is what brought evil forces into their lives. Sharon believes she has put that evil behind her. But Greg, he wonders if the powers he unleashed still follow him to this day.
I've continued to have experiences to this day. And I've had a lot of other negative things happen in my life. And, you could shrug them off to life. But now I don't know. Now I don't know if a negative energy hasn't decided to attach itself to me to try and weigh me down or usurp anything that I'm trying to achieve. At the end of the day, it's a little cathartic to be able to speak to it when it continues to happen. And with time and with age and with maturity, you're able to look and say, well, you're able to connect the dots a little bit. And they seem to point back to that. They seem to point back to that day, that summer afternoon playing with a Ouija board innocently with my sister and her 2 friends.
I really warn against anybody even just saying, it's just a game, just a piece of wood. Well, you can make it out of cardboard too, and it'll do the same thing for you. If you have that presence of mind that you want to be in touch with the dark side, then that's exactly what's going to happen. But once you're in, it's almost like joining a gang in New York. Once you're in, it's hard to get out, really hard to get out. So it really took years to finally get to that point where I feel that we're free. So always watching out for it, though. Always watching out.